My name is Dwayne Baumgartner. I'm sitting down with our web development and design team here at CityRank Media, and we're chatting today about a pretty large web project that our agency just wrapped up and some of the challenges and how this team was able to address these. I understand this was one of the first times that we ran a project from beginning to end with a client on an extremely shortened timeline. Anthony, I know that you were responsible for, or at least had a lot of input into the design aspect of the new site, and which was a pretty big feat because we were taking 3 different websites and placing into one. Can you talk about how you went through that journey of creating those wireframes for user interaction and engagement?
Sure. So in the beginning, the big thing that I did was do research on the client. I spent a good amount of time looking at their old site and even watching their videos on YouTube just to kind of see what the message was and what was it that they wanted to drive home to their clients. So in that, I took a lot of that messaging and wanted to input it in the design that when they go to senior care authority, that this is like a place of relief and that there's clear direction where they want to go. And that kind of like all funnels together by having all 3 of these different verticals cohesive together. So it doesn't feel like when you go to certain different parts of the website that they are like different looking websites. Like it should all be together.
And that's actually a really interesting thing that you bring up. So you had mentioned a calming effect or something to that effect. Talk to me about that. And obviously when people are using this company's service, they're probably under a lot of stress and want to make good decisions and stuff like that. How did you use that in the design to help put people at ease?
I think color is a big part of it, where you use a lot of white and a lot of open space. And there's also just, on the old site, there is a lot of information, which is good to have, but you don't need to have everything front facing in the beginning. You don't need to see a form that has like 20 fields. So making things that just are broken apart and that easy to digest, that all kind of, I think, helps a client use the website much easier because not everything is going to be in your face. It just kind of is the things you need to see or you want to see, like you have control over that versus just, hey, here's everything.
Oh, that's actually interesting. That's a good perfect segue to my next question. Nathan and Steven, you guys were responsible for at least architecting or thinking about the back end of the site. And this was a site that previously before was a little bit fragmented, which is understandable. I think that we as an agency are seeing that more and more with our customers, where maybe they had a website and they want to expand it or put something else on, and then they use a different agency with different technologies or a different platform, and pretty soon they have a pretty fragmented solution that their own marketing team can't work in, which was very much the case in this situation. You had 3 different agencies working on it, and I'm not quite sure that all 3 were on the same page. Thinking about that and making it easy for our customers to update their sites going forward, how did you guys structure the back end to make it easy for them to make kind of simpler updates?
One key decision that we made early on was that this would all be in one CMS. So we chose WordPress as the basis for all 3 of those sites. There's the corporate, the franchise, and the directory. And this really helped us to keep the design cohesive, and it'll also allow us to make updates more easily. And we're able to share components between all aspects of the design. So things just look cohesive and similar, and also able to execute code on all of these different sites because we own all aspects of it.
Great. And when you guys were building this, we also had to think about, these franchisees at the territory level and them being able to update their sites. Can you guys talk to me a little bit about how you guys used the properties or the WordPress CMS to be able to accomplish this, to give them access to their small portion of the sites, but have the corporation itself be kind of the overall key holder to the entire website?
Yeah, I think that allowing the franchisees to be able to edit their own sites, that was one of the key reasons that led us to using WordPress Multisite. So with that, we were able to build out an actual like full WordPress site. It is under a subdirectory in the whole kind of cohesive site. But if a franchisee wants to be able to edit their site, we can give them the keys to that, and they can have a full functioning WordPress site that they can make edits to that isn't gonna also have access to the corporate side of the franchise or directory site, and it just gives them access to their data.
Okay. Yeah, let's kind of switch gears here a little bit and talk about the directory site, because I think that was a feat in itself. You guys were able to take data that was pulled from the client's Salesforce installation and be able to press that into a WordPress site. So I know that particular portion of the site has over 50,000 pages. Kind of walk me through the process of how you guys did that at scale so that we could save the customer money, but also make it super easily updatable for future updates.
Yeah, that was quite the undertaking. It's like, close to 60,000 pages, and we basically just had to take the kind of flattened data from Salesforce that just had information about all of these communities, amenities, allowances, and different features, and we had to kind of design out a data structure in WordPress that would be most efficient at that scale. And one of the things we quickly learned was being able to store the location-specific data in a custom database table that allows for much more efficient querying when trying to search or show relevant locations relative to the location that's being viewed. And it quickly got pretty complicated, but I think the solution that we ended up with is really good for the user, because you can not only search for a senior living community, but also see nearby ones. You can see like 8 nearby ones on that screen, and it's also context aware to also, if there's a advisor available in that territory, it'll link to the advisor's website and allow for that person to potentially contact the advisor.
So that's interesting. So you're saying that when a user lands on one of these directory pages, the website can relatively know where that location is and also serve them 8 locations around that.
Yeah, so we have the addresses of all of the locations in the directory are geocoded, so we have the actual latitude and longitude. So we can take the page, it loads up, we look at the zip code of the current page, we can tell which territory they're in, if they're in a franchisee's territory, and we can dynamically add in the franchisee's information into the page. But then we can also use their latitude and longitude to query the database to find the 8 nearest communities to the community that they're currently viewing.
Wow, awesome. So I'm going to ask you, Anthony. Steven was able to provide all that data. How did you take that data and put it into a clean UX that end users were able to use and displayed nicely and actually was replicatable across 60,000 pages?
Yeah, so when I designed the mockups, and this is the case for any web project, I do try to keep in mind like what is practical and what is doable as far as like the design mockup phase versus it being in an actual production. And I think I had conversations with Steven about like, hey, is this something that we can do? So it's not over designed, but it makes sense. As far as integrating it across all these pages, we did have like this universal template that was dynamic and set up just like in an area so that depending on the page it gets served on, like it is dynamically changing, but it's all just housed under this one template. So that's how we did it.
So, a project this size, you're dealing with mass amounts of data and a lot of programming on one side of the house, and on the other side of the house, you have to take into account design and capabilities and what WordPress can do with the different functions. How did you keep that all on track?
Yeah, so I think initially it can be challenging when you get a project from a client and there's a certain idea of what it's going to look like. And obviously as mockups are delivered to the client, things change. So that was something that we had to make sure was very heavily documented in our internal system, and that we had regular communication between all of our teams, just to make sure that the mockups were on track and that the development side was also moving along at the same time, because it's such a tight turnaround. We needed to make sure that the development was also progressing as the design was progressing, that both teams were keeping up with each other.
Right. All right, I'm gonna ask one question of each of you guys. What was one thing that you learned from the design aspect from this particular project that you feel is something that we can incorporate with future builds with our clients?
I think being able to do dynamic data at a large scale was something I didn't really know was possible or how we would go about achieving it. But now that we have systems in place to do this at a big scale, but also know that we can kind of design this thing however we want, I think is really helpful going forward, because there's almost like limitless possibilities as far as like how we can do this.
Awesome. Steven, what would you say about that? What is one thing that you learned with this process that you feel like we can take forward as an agency to help other clients in positions that are very similar?
Yeah, I think for dealing with, especially, like franchises, is a good opportunity to be able to deploy multi-site at scale. I know we've had a few sites in the past where we used WordPress Multisite, but at this scale, it got to the point where I was like, okay, there's no other option other than like automation. Like this is not going to work if we have to go in and just hit new site and create a new site from scratch. And I think that was pretty eye-opening, just the how powerful it can be for administrating a lot of sites that are on the same multi-site network.
Yeah. I'm going to switch it up a little bit for you, Nathan. Obviously, you have, kind of two sides of the house. You have kind of the design side of the house where it looks aesthetically pleasing for customers and people visiting the site. And then you also have to take in the account, code and not having too much bloat. Understanding that website speed, security, all that kind of stuff is important, but also visual aesthetics are important. How did you balance that?
From the beginning, designing the mockup, we're thinking about how we're going to be developing it and implementing it. So we're not designing things impossible for us to design or things that are just going to cause bloat or site speed issues. So, starting from the very beginning wireframes to a more detailed mockup, we're thinking about all those considerations earlier on.
Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate your guys' time speaking with me today. Thank you.